where he found out the man was a registered sex offender. From then on, Tola rode to school with his dad. Number 5 was submitted by Moon Earthling. Roba was sitting in a local park with some friends when a man with a large bag sat at a bench. She didn't pay him much attention until she glanced over and saw him pull a beer and a rabbit out of his bag. He put it on the grassy area behind him and stayed there with his beer for about 20 minutes. Then he put the rabbit back in the bag and walked away without saying a word to anyone. Number 4 was submitted by Queen Sammy 87. One time, Froggy witnessed a guy piss through a letterbox. He just walked up to the door, whipped his thing out, and pissed in the letterbox. Then he got out a key and opened the door and fell into the house. Turns out the guy pissed through his own letterbox and then fell into it. Froggy laughed about this for over an hour. Number 3 was submitted by AJ Solus 4641. When Dolan was 3 or 4, his grandma drank so much, she got confused and started singing happy birthday, but it wasn't Dolan's birthday. 5 minutes later, she stripped naked and jumped in the freezing cold water of Dolan's pool. As soon as she jumped in, she started screaming, "Dolan, this alligator's getting me, help!" It ended up taking 3 hours to get her out of the pool. Number 2 was submitted by King of Kings 1461. Spincis was leaving school one day to head to the park when she saw a drunk woman running around with a mysterious object. This woman was swinging the object around at people, and it smelled horrible. After several minutes of this, someone called the cops, and they arrested the woman. The mysterious object turned out to be a dead cat. Number 1 was submitted by me, your narrator, Ringo the One. One of the weirdest encounters I had was one time when I came out of the club. This was during my stay in England. I was having a great time, and whenever I go to the club, I don't actually drink. I was pretty sober for the most part, and I just go out there and dance. So by the time I got out the club, there was a bum in the corner, and it seemed like he had something in his pocket. I don't know what it was, but he just kept moving it. So then he screamed to me, "Hey you, hey, come here you." And then I was kind of freaked out. I was like, "Ah, man, I really don't want to mess with anybody right now. Please, just let me go home. I just want to go to sleep. I had a good night. Please don't mess it up." And it was a Friday too. So he kept bugging me, and he was telling me, "Hey, I told you to come in. I want to show you something." So then I walked very carefully because I wasn't too sure. It could have been knifed, it could have been a gun. You never know. You just never know. So I walked up to him, and then he told me this. "Hey man, I want to show you something. It's in my pocket. You think you can reach for it?" As he told me that, I saw him, and he was just moving his hand inside his pocket, up and down. After that, I was freaked out, and I ran immediately. As I was running, he went and screamed out something again. He said this, I just wanted to show you something." I saw some sort of liquid hit the floor, and I was extremely freaked out. Huge thanks for the folks over on our Planet Dawn subreddit for submitting their stories. Alright guys, what's the weirdest encounter with a drunk person you've ever had? Let us know on the Reddit page linked below, and you might be featured in a future countdown. This video was made possible by our fans over on Patreon.
Planet Dolan.
From rude store clerks to tactless teachers.
The Planet Dolan crew reenacts some of the best true stories from our subreddit about the most unprofessional things we've ever experienced.
I'm Nixium.
And I'm Doopy.
And today, we'll both be narrating.
Number 10 was submitted by Solo Wolf Badass. The worst experience Andy Mations had was when she went with her mom to a parent-teacher conference. When she walked into the classroom, the teacher immediately said, "Oh, I didn't know your mom was an immigrant." Andy was so pissed off, but her mom told her in Spanish, "What did he say? Translate for me." She obviously didn't translate, but instead went up to her teacher and slapped him across the face and cursed him out in Spanish. He said, "You're one of them. If I could, I would give you an F, but I can call immigration, you little whore." He screamed it so loudly, everyone in the hallway heard what he said and called the principal. Andy explained what happened, and the principal immediately fired him.
Number 9 was submitted by Chubby Bun _ When Pandora first started at her current job, she needed some help with a part of the business she typically didn't deal with. So she walked across the building to the person she needed to talk to, and when she arrived at his cube, Pandora saw his dick in his hand and full-on porn on his computer screen. He tried to quickly close the tab and play it off like it didn't happen. She was so grossed out though that she just mumbled out an excuse and walked away quickly. He never looked her in the eye or talked to her ever since.
Number 8 was submitted by LunarChild96. After Melissa had gotten out of classes for the day, she went to a cafe near campus before going home because she was really hungry and couldn't wait. The cafe gave a student discount when an ID was shown, so she did. The man working at the register got angry and tore the ID in half. He yelled at her, calling her a privileged cunt and telling her to leave or else he would call the cops. Melissa didn't understand what was happening because she'd been to that cafe multiple times and nobody ever said anything when she gave her ID. She started crying and apologizing, then started to leave when the manager came out of the back and stopped her. She scolded the employee for cursing and trying to force her to leave. A couple of people she went to school with happened to be there and comforted her while glaring at the employee. The manager told the man they accepted student IDs and that he had no right to refuse someone. He was fired and told to leave for his inappropriate behavior, and Melissa got her lunch free of charge.
Number 7 was submitted by Aquamarine Thunder. In 6th grade, M. Kyle M's science teacher bragged that he used to be a professional gymnast, and since he would also occasionally teach the gym class, he would do backflips in front of the class to prove it. Now one day, he decided to do a backflip inside the science classroom for some reason. He didn't have enough room to complete the landing though, and his legs slammed into a counter full of chemicals, spilling them everywhere. The whole school needed to be evacuated because they were worried some of the fumes were toxic. It happened on the second to the last day of school, and it was M. Kyle M's last year there, so he had no idea if the teacher was fired.
Number 6 was submitted by Slooty Death Tech. Sid works for a medical examiner's office, and one day he went out on a pretty routine call. An elderly, ill man died at home, and it was their job to talk to the family, take photos, and get the body back to the morgue. They got to the house, and Sid and his partner introduced themselves to the family, then started their jobs. Sid was talking to the cops within earshot of the rest of the family. Cop number 1 started talking about the position the body was found in, mockingly, laughing and making crude gestures. The other laughed along. The deceased man's daughter could see and hear everything clearly. Sid told them that it was unprofessional, and cop number 1 shrugged his shoulders and said, "I think I would want to die too if I lived in a place this shitty." Then he left. Sid was embarrassed about their actions, and the poor family was more traumatized. He's dealt with plenty of shitty people, but nothing quite that mean.
Number 5 was submitted by Bubby 56789. So Dolan had a co-worker at a doctor's office that would go into the bathroom and be there for about an hour, and then he would come out like nothing ever happened. One day, Dolan went into the bathroom to see what was he up to. The door slowly was pushed open, and it completely exposed his co-worker who was smuggling cocaine, which had been going on for a long time. The idiot had been sneaking drugs into the office in the bathroom for years, and no one ever knew. The man was fired on the spot, and the coke was confiscated.
Number 4 was submitted by Zebra with a Bow Tie. The most unprofessional thing Helbin ever experienced was when he was 10 and was at the dollar store with his dad. They were at the checkout line behind a fat woman who was buying a bag of powdered donuts. There was a problem with the cash register, so it had to buffer, and the lady said it would take about 7 minutes to do its thing. The fat woman complained a lot, so the cashier openly said, "It's not my fault you're a big fat ass who can't go 5 minutes without donuts." Helbin and his dad, being the horrible people they are, laughed so hard that it hurt, and the fat lady stormed out. They still laugh about it. God, that's so mean.
Number 3 was submitted by Lycanthroplas. Shima went to an interview at a company that sounded pretty dope. It was in a nice building in a nice part of town. She was dressed professionally, she had her resume and references ready, and she walked in feeling confident. But she didn't expect what was waiting for her behind the door. The room was full of people waiting to be interviewed. Some of them had been there for over 2 hours, and the staff that was supposed to be interviewing were something. There was a woman walking around in an oversized man's t-shirt with no pants on. There was some sort of movie blaring in the break room, which caused whoever was in the other room to shout into a phone. This then made whoever the hell was in the break room turn up the volume even more. So it was just a big shit show. But the worst part by far, was this one guy. He was just some dude, and he was going in and out of the room, and he was slowly licking gummy bears off the palm of his hand, and giggling. Disgusting. Then he would stop and look at Shima and some of the other women before going in and out of the door that went from the office to the hallway. She was only there for half an hour, and then she left.
Number 2 was submitted by Kalina the Zodiac. An unprofessional experience Gooby had was when her and her family were at a fast food restaurant. While they were eating, they overheard a woman gossiping about some people, and as curious human-fish hybrids, they listened in. Until the woman and the other workers started having a cussing party. Gooby's dad got up and asked them politely to stop because he had children there, as Gooby was 6 at the time and her siblings were 3, 5, and 7. They stopped for a few minutes, then started back up. So her dad asked for the manager and they said, "Hell no, we don't want to get fired, go sit down." Her dad got angry and went to the manager's office, leaving Gooby and her siblings at the table. They heard them cussing and they started repeating words without realizing what they were actually saying. Her dad finally came back from talking to the manager and heard them cussing. He said, "Don't ever say those words again." The workers looked and laughed. Then one of them shouted, "You need to work on your parenting skills." Gooby's dad was more angered than ever and clocked the man in the face before taking off in their car. They got 7 people fired that day.
And number 1 was submitted by me. I used to work at a grocery store, and at that store was a man named Robert. He was a legend among the people, but not for the reason you might think. Robert always had this tendency of going up to the female employees, and he would tell them about how during break time he would go into the bathroom and jack off. And apparently he thought they wanted to hear that or something. Robert also sometimes would tell customers for some reason. And the thing is he never got fired. Like, he was there the day I walked in the door and got the job. And he was there the day I left the job. And even today, he's still there. Maybe he's like the CEO's like special cousin or something. I don't know. Anyway, I can tell you this. People learned pretty quickly in this town, don't talk to Robert, because he's really creepy. He's really awkward.
Huge thanks to the
Planet Dolan.
From Codex to grass-fed coffee beans, the Planet Dolan crew reenacts some of the best true stories from our subreddit about the dumbest questions we've been asked at work. I'm Hellbent, and today I'll be your narrator. Number 10 was submitted by Killdozer688. Mikhailum used to work at an open farm caring for goats and chickens. The goats were his main focus, but Mikhailum often had to keep an eye out for chicken eggs. Because the chickens were free roaming, they would often lay eggs on the goat's hay rack. When Mikhailum came out of one of the goat houses with a few chicken eggs, he found a woman and her son watching him. The kid asked, "Are those goat eggs?" Mikhailum just said,
No, goat eggs are purple and made of chocolate.
Number 9 was submitted by De La Rosa 99. When Ramona was 16, she subbed for the receptionist at a salon. One day, an elderly woman wearing a red pantsuit, luxurious brown fur, stiletto heels, and oversized sunglasses came in carrying her little Pomeranian. She went up to Ramona and asked what kind of haircuts they offered. Ramona pulled out a style book of the latest hair trends and dyes. The lady settled on dyeing her hair in just a simple cut. As Ramona led her to the part of the salon where they do hair, she asked, "Can you do the same for my dog?" Ramona had to tell her politely no, since this was clearly a salon for humans. She flipped out and started barking at her like she was stupid. Luckily, the owner stepped in. Number 8 was submitted by MadDog197X. When Sybil Spider worked at a Panera Bread, a guy walked in late one evening. he asked if they were serving any of their breakfast items. Civil Spider told him they stopped selling breakfast items at 10:30. The customer gave him a look and said, "So why aren't you selling them right now?" Civil Spider had to explain that he meant 10:30 in the morning. The place isn't even open at 10:30 p.m. The man slowly nodded, said, "Well, that's fine. I came here to get mac and cheese anyways." In his head, Civil Spider thought,
Then why the hell did you ask about breakfast?
Number 7 was submitted by Bully Tooth. Ladybot used to work as a lifeguard at a beach in a conservative town and was often questioned by religious people about her beliefs. This could get a little uncomfortable since several members of the staff weren't exactly straight. She generally tried to keep that information secret for obvious reasons. One day, though, a middle-aged mother ran up to her, red-faced with her son in tow. She yelled at Ladybot, "Why are you trying to impurify my son with your unholy desires?" Number 6 was submitted by Crazy Coyote KY. When Sweet Commando was working at the counter at a bakery, a man came in and ordered a dozen donuts. After receiving his order, the man then asked if Sweet Commando was sure there were a dozen donuts in the box. Sweet Commando opened the box to recount. He got to 12 and the man asked, "Where's the last one?" The man said it was the law that they had to give him 13 donuts or a bakery's dozen. Sweet Commando had to explain several things. First, the man had ordered a dozen donuts, not a baker's dozen. And second, it's a baker's dozen, not a bakery's dozen. And most importantly, there's no law that says a bakery has to sell donuts in that number. The man took his order and said he was never coming back. He was back 3 days later. Number 5 was submitted by Puntiful Jokes. When Doopy worked as a waitress at a little coffee shop, she would sometimes get questions from people that didn't know much about coffee, like, "What does 3 shots mean?" One day, a guy came in, and when it was his turn to order, Doopy asked him nicely what he wanted. His response was, "Are your coffee beans grass-fed or organic?" She explained that coffee beans are plants and aren't fed grass. He asked again, "So are they grass-fed or not?" Doopy couldn't get it through to him, so she just told him no, they were not grass-fed. The man then left the shop without ordering. Number 4 was submitted by Tattooed Wolfgirl 21. Robo worked at a movie theater as a cleaner, cleaning the cinemas, the bathrooms, and everything else. One day, she was in charge of checking the woman's bathroom every half hour, just to make sure there wasn't a huge mess. As Robo entered one of them, a woman followed her in and asked her, "Excuse me, where's the bathroom?" Robo stared at her for a moment to see if she was joking, but she was actually serious. The woman patiently waited for Robo, so she just pointed towards the stalls. The woman looked at them and said with a smile, "Oh, I thought this was the boys' room. Thanks so much." Then she walked out of the bathroom. Number 3 was submitted by Zai Mai Sakino. Pandora used to work at a Dollar Tree, which is a place that sells random things for $1 each, hence the name Dollar Tree. One day, she was at the register waiting to check someone out when another woman just a few feet away spoke to her. "Excuse me, how much is this?" she asked.
It's $1, ma'am.
Pandora replied, trying not to be insulting. "Oh, and how much is this?" she asked, pointing to a cup.
Everything here is $1, ma'am.
Pandora replied, biting her tongue. The store had signs everywhere saying everything's $1. The signs in the window said the same thing. How could you get that wrong? Number 2 was submitted by Calcifer84. Sid once worked at a 12th century Montanbailey castle in England, which is essentially a big stone-walled fort with a fancy port-to-cool's gatehouse. While on a break and heading to the toilet, a confused young tourist with a kid stopped them and asked, "Excuse me, where's the castle?" Sid thought she was joking, but it quickly dawned on him that she wasn't. He said,
"You're already at the castle, miss."
And he gestured his hand to the surrounding buildings and the castle walls. She replied, No, not this. The real castle." Sid insisted.
This is the real castle.
She started talking slower like he was dumb. No! The castle? Big tall thing with pointy turrets, towers, and a drawbridge. Sid explained again.
Miss, this is the real castle. You're within its walls right now. We are standing in its central courtyard. That's the gatehouse you just walked through.
She then cut him off. I don't believe this! You advertised a bloody castle, for fuck's sake! All that's here is a stone wall! She later complained and demanded her money back, saying it didn't look anything like castles in films. When asked what films, she replied, Disney. What's the dumbest question I've ever been asked at work? So I've been doing a few voice acting gigs, and one has lasted a really long time. I actually love working it. It's great. It's fantastic. Still doing it today, actually. And you know how any job goes. Some people stay, some people leave, new people come in. It's just part of how this kind of stuff works. But if I had to pick the dumbest question I've ever been asked, it's where is Shima? Huge thanks for the folks over on our Planet Dolan subreddit for submitting their stories. We have another question for you. What's the weirdest job you ever got paid to do? Let us know on the Reddit page linked below and you might be featured in a future countdown.
This video was made possible by our fans over on Patreon. Thanks for your support, guys.
And that's all I got for now. Thanks for watching and I'll see you next time. Oh, hey Shima, what's up?
Planet Dolan.
From being punched in the stomach by Santa,
To being in the woods.
the Planet Dolan crew reenacts some of the best true stories from our subreddit about the weirdest things we've been asked to do.
I'm Hellbent,
And I'm Nixium.
and today we'll both be narrating.
Number 10 was submitted by Ral365. A few years ago at an anime convention, which is, home to a lot of weird stuff in general, Pringle was cosplaying as the warden from the anime series Super Jail. While strolling outside the convention center, out of nowhere, this one fangirl wearing Japanese cat ears sneaks up from behind. She was playfully pretending to stalk Pringle. He didn't think anything of it until she put a plastic collar tied to a fake chain around his neck. Pringle was caught off guard at first, but she told him that she was just really happy to see someone cosplaying from a show that was falling into obscurity. She then wanted to take a picture with Pringle with the collar around his neck, pretending to be scared. It was all in good fun, but even by convention standards, it was kind of weird.
Number 9 was submitted by Cray Cray Fox 10. When Dolan was 13, he was over at his friend's house playing video games. In the middle of a game, his friend dared him, if you lose this game, then you have to wear my sister's bikini, but if you win, I'll give you 20 bucks. Dolan couldn't pass up an opportunity to make $20, so he accepted the deal. Under all that pressure, Dolan failed miserably. As promised, he put on the bikini. The moment he had the slightly too small outfit on, his friend's sister opened the door. Dolan was never allowed back in that house ever again.
Number 8 was submitted by Clyde Is My Name. Doopy was shopping at the mall with her mother, and they both decided to go to the food court for some grub. After getting their food and drinks, Doopy's mom went to the restroom, leaving her with their belongings. That's when Doopy noticed a woman in a subway uniform walking towards her. Once they were face to face, the subway lady asked her,
"Can you do me a favor and take my shift while I go buy something?"
Doopy was dumbfounded. She declined to help, but the lady would not stop begging. Eventually, she tossed her apron and hat at Doopy and just walked off. Instead of going after the lady, she decided to put on the subway uniform. Why did she do this? Good question. I don't know. When Doopy's mom came back, she noticed her daughter was no longer at the table. She found her behind the Subway counter, walked over and said, "Yes, I'll get a my kid is in trouble to go."
Number 7 was submitted by Esper the God. In Spinal Palms Middle School, there was a group of weird kids that sat together at lunch. Their leader was very short, with hair covering his eyes. The leader of the weirdos walked up to Spinal Palm during free period while he had a tall kid piggybacking on him. For about a minute, they both stared at Spinal Palm while he stared right back. The leader eventually asked, "Can you stand to the right of that bean?" Spinal Palm looked around for a bean but found nothing. "No, that one," he said as he pointed to the middle of the hallway. Spinal Palm walked over and stood where he pointed. Out of nowhere, 5 kids circled around him chanting in unison, "Hail the bean! Hail the space whale!" over and over. To this day, Spinal Palm still doesn't know what that was all about.
Number 6 was submitted by Socially Awkward. When Gergak was 9, he was out playing in the woods with his cousin and a neighbor girl who was slightly older. When going on long walks in the forest and the urge came to pee, Gergak would find a bush somewhere far off the path and do his business, rather than walk all the way back home. While they were climbing around on a tree, his cousin proudly announced that he was going to go home to pee, leaving Gergak there with this girl. Gergak climbed over to the girl and said,
"Yeah, he could have just peed in a bush or something. Why did he run back?"
She looked at him for a second, and then she laughed.
Pee in a bush? What are you talking about?
Gergak answered,
I don't know about girls, but I know guys that have done it.
She paused, and then asked Gergak to show her. He told her to wait where she was while he ran into the bushes. Gergak made sure she couldn't see him, and he peed. When he came back, she didn't believe that he had actually gone.
You have to do it right here in front of me if you want me to believe you.
At that moment, Gergak realized that this girl was in it to see his Dibbly Von Dangly. He gave her a funny look, turned around, and he ran like hell back to his cousin's house. Gergak never saw that girl again.
Number 5 was submitted by I'm Not With Their FBI. Ghost Toast used to work as a janitor at a fancy resort hotel. One day, his boss asked him to quietly clean out one of the supply closets at a very specific time and to not tell the other staff what he saw. When the time came to clean the very specific supply closet at said very specific time, Ghost Toast found a woman and her kids sleeping in there. For almost a week, he cleaned the supply closet on the down low, tidying up after the 2 occupants. Ghost Toast later found out that she was his boss's daughter, who had recently been evicted from her apartment. Nobody was supposed to find out since it was illegal.
Number 4 was submitted by Moat of Labros. Zaraganba was at the mall with a couple of his friends in the early 2000s. It was during Easter time, and the mall had a place where you could get your photo taken with the Easter Bunny, in quotes. When his friends saw this, they dared Zaraganba to wait in line and ask to have his picture taken, with the Easter Bunny pretending to punch him in the stomach. Zaraganba reached the front of the line and he requested to have his photo taken in the unusual pose. But unfortunately, the man in the bunny suit did not go for it and told him to buzz off. But later that year, they decided to try their luck again with Santa, and he was a lot more accommodating.
Number 3 was submitted by Renee and. Some years ago, the Eurovision Song Contest was held in Sidious's home country. He was on his way home from boarding school and lined up at the train station to buy a ticket. A 40-something-year-old woman ran in and asked the person in front of Sidious if he would buy a ticket for her. He didn't speak their language, so she ended up asking him instead. She was going to see Eurovision, but her train was arriving soon and she needed a ticket now. She gave Sidious $100, even though the ticket only cost $20, and told him to buy the ticket for her. When it was his turn, the woman just cut in line and bought the ticket herself. Sidious asked